Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I guess the first order of business is to read it, if we have not, and approve or correct first, and then approve the minutes for two meetings, one on September 16th, and the other is on the 21st of October. I have one correction to make, and only one, which is Suran is spelled differently. It's S-U-R-R-A-N.
R.R.
Saran Pine.
One
Yes,
N,
indeed.
two R's. Renee, do you have any change you'd like to make?
I don't think so.
I think the right order is that only the people who were at the meeting can vote on approving the
That's
minutes.
correct.
So it would
I
be
will
Renee and
abstain.
me. So I would move that we would approve the minutes. Renee,
Me too, I second that.
vote. Do I have ayes? We have two ayes.
And abstention.
Before we get into the agenda, I would just like to compliment Renee on educating us. I had never thought about the safety issues of electricity, and I thought that was extremely illuminating
Gotta love
discussion.
power.
So, and I think that's what we're here for, is to learn, and I learned a lot, and I want to thank you for it. That was really productive. So perhaps you would like to set the order of the discussion for us?
So I wanted to just, I know you two have been to two meetings where we talked about it, but for Ted and Amanda's benefit, maybe just one more last time, go over the scope of work, just to
Sure.
make sure everyone is aware of purpose.
Thank
So
you.
the select board tasked the marijuana committee to discuss and provide recommendations for rules regarding medical caregivers, if you believe such rules should happen in town that work within the state's already existing regulations. That's the gist of it, I thought. Do either of you have any comments or thoughts on it?
Not at the moment.
All right.
We're such an enthusiast.
That's it.
I just woke up, so I'm like, I had to take a nap.
It's a good day for a nap.
It was a good day, right at the public landing.
All right. Well, that was
Sweet.
it. That's all I had for scope.
All righty. Good scope, Max, good scope.
Thank you. Oh, so I don't know. I thought you were temporarily running the meeting. So for today, all I had was I handed a copy out to everyone already, but it's references to the medical marijuana dispensary and cultivation facilities that are in the land use ordinance. This was discussed last time. This is something that the town currently has a moratorium on, because we now have the ability to opt out of having these in town. And I wanted to just show where it is in the ordinance. And I have the recommendation on the back of removing the language from the land use ordinance, if that passes, so that that can then be put into a marijuana ordinance if that's something we do come to the conclusion of. But if we don't, then it would just be out of the ordinance in general.
But this is pertaining to the actual medical dispensary licenses that are issued through the state.
Correct.
Okay.
This is not caregivers.
Yes.
This is just dispensaries.
Dispensaries.
And the
Okay.
reason this happened is, before the most recent legislation of opting out, the town, to protect itself, restricted the dispensary to a specific small area on Route 1 in the business district. But with the opt-out, this creates a conflict between that protective measure and, do you understand, and the new opt-out. And so to eliminate the ambiguity and restore us now to the new law, opt-out, it's to take out the section DD. The town, in a meeting, had a moratorium vote of the town. This room was filled up, and the town overwhelmingly, I think there were only two people that voted against it.
Fascinating.
I
Thank
think
you.
the only reason they voted against it was because they wanted caregivers included,
Yes.
Wow.
which was a
Right.
separate issue.
But everybody else disagreed with them. They wanted to hold this vote up. So the town basically voted for the moratorium, whose purpose is ultimately to eliminate this section and then restore it to current law, which is opt-out, which means that the town would have to vote for an opt-in. Yeah, they wanted to tie in they wanted very restricted caregivers, which the town really, it was not the sense that that was the appropriate time to discuss it. That's why this meeting is here, is actually to see if there's rational rules about caregivers. And knowing that there can't be rules that actually, that in effect de facto actually violates state law, which says there have to be medical caregivers. Does that make sense?
Good.
So some people want rules that they say they're neutral, but they're not neutral. And the reality is they would shut caregivers down. And so.
Right, which you can't do,
Which you can't do
On the
and
town level.
should not do. Right.
which I did clarify that through the state, what Stan and I were, he was telling me.
Right, and I talked to Stan, and he's talking with someone,
Wrong.
he's talking with who he was talking about. I think he talked
Right.
to you about that.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's
The
gonna.
discussion was, it was under the impression that because the town opts out, there are no more caregivers allowed to grow, which is not true. So
No.
I called the state and,
First of all, the existing retail stores are grandfathered.
Right.
And secondly, caregivers are through the state. The town can only have rational rules within the state guidelines.
Right, we thought there was a different state law that just passed, or went into effect, but Stan's gonna have to call the person and talk to them. That's why I didn't really
Right.
wanna talk too much about that tonight.
How old are your patients?
what's that?
What are the ages of the people you see that,
18 to 96.
no one's under 18?
No.
Interesting.
I have one patient that's under 18, but
You can have a patient.
the
I'm aware,
parents
yes.
are pretty much their guardian and have established their card for them.
That's exactly what I was looking for,
Mhm.
yes. Yep. Clear definitions to
Yes.
how they obtained marijuana at a very young age. Thank you.
It's pretty rare to have under 18.
It is, but boy, when they do need it, it's amazing just how effective it is when nothing else really works.
Yeah, exactly.
Stunning.
So, I'll just quickly go through this and I'll open up to the floor to see what people think. So on page 1, on the first page, that's just where you'll find it on the table of contents if you were to open it up. And at the top of the page, it should reference where the article or the page where it can be found. And sorry that this wasn't highlighted, but medical marijuana dispensary and cultivation facility, which is under Article 5, it's DD. So that would be removed. Then in Article 3, on the matrix chart, it's between the marina and the medical office. It's on the lower third of the matrix there. Currently, it's only allowed to be approved by the planning board for Route 1 Commercial A. Then on the third page, on page 410 in the land use ordinance, it says that this is just a parking requirement. Medical marijuana dispensaries must have 4 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet. And then pages 5-46 and 5-47, this is regarding special performance standards that a medical marijuana dispensary and cultivation facility have to meet. I just put word for word what it says. Obviously be located in the commercial A district. And then a lot of it is just a matter of meeting some state regulations, pretty much. Video surveillance, on-site security, getting certified by the state itself. And then only having 1 registered cultivation facility and 1 dispensary in the town of Waldoboro. And then the last 2 paragraphs you'll see on the back page are registered cultivation facility and registered dispensary. And those can be found on 16-21, which is the definitions of the land use ordinance. And then my proposal at the bottom is to strike it from the land use ordinance based on the guidance of Michael Stoltz, who's an attorney from the Maine Municipal Association,
Good.
so that we are opted out.
Comment?
So are you opting out of future people coming in, or does this affect the people
Dispensaries.
who are? Well, we also have cultivation facility in there.
But that-
So-
that's
so-
only linked to a dispensary.
Okay, so
Right.
it's a dispensary like cultivation,
But
just
what
because
they're-
there are.
What they're
there
really
are-
talking about, Amanda, is the dispensary licenses that the state holds, that they only give out, like, there's only like,
Yeah.
6 in operation right
Yeah.
now? And with retail and stuff, they're not even opening up licenses for this, which will probably go by the wayside in
As
the
in
next
dispensaries will
2
probably
years.
disappear anyways.
So-
I think most of those big corporations will go for the rec. They're not going to be trying to keep pursuing
No.
the medical stuff. No, I was just when I hadn't seen the cultivation facility part. I was just curious how that was, going to affect people who are currently.
Just linked to dispensary.
When you're, the quick question, are you talking about caregiver growers, or are you talking about people who grow and then sell it to caregivers? What do you mean by people who are already established?
Caregivers.
Well, I mean, technically, as a caregiver in the state of Maine, you can sell.
This wouldn't
some
apply
of
to
your surplus
caregivers.
to, yeah. So I was talking about a medical caregiver who's
Correct.
already been in Waldeboro for a
Correct.
long
I
period of
think-
time.
I think at most this would be someone who just grows
Wants
and
to.
just sells, like they don't have
Okay.
their own patients,
Okay.
that type of.
Okay.
I think that's at most, but I'll clarify that if you'd
Okay.
like.
Any other discussion?
Is there any I haven't heard any discussion at all, I don't believe, about how these products would be allowed to be advertised. What do you know
I think the
about
state has
advertising?
that really
This-
kind of squished and not allowed to
That's
be.
just why I brought the topic up. I thought that was about the
Understand.
status quo, wondered if there was any variability.
I'm not completely sure, but I think there's something in the law that says that you can't, like,
It's like can't be 500 from, you can't have a sign like 500 from the school or
yeah,
something
but you
like
can't
that.
even, you're not allowed to donate to, the local hockey team and have your sign up there.
Oh, wow.
There's some sort of, like, you're not allowed to use,
Okay.
you're also not allowed to use charitable donations to
Mhm.
create any publicity or anything, so they do have it very restricted.
But it can involve a sign on personally owned property and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I would just like to focus discussion, though, that is something that once we get rid of this ordinance about
This we
this,
talked about.
we can talk about that in more general, but I'd like to focus on this, if we have a sense of the group, if we're ready to vote and make a recommendation.
I think
Can we go with Max's proposal?
just, and then I'll just make sure to be clear about this. If you're fine with it, the next step would just be the planning board reviewing it.
Understood.
Just,
So I would make a motion.
I'd
Do I have a
second it.
Do we have any other discussion? Do we have a vote? Ayes?
Yeah, sir. Sure.
Okay, so it's 4-0. Okay.
um,
Like I've said from the day one, this is basically just
I-
nothing we really need to discuss. We have
No, we
way
no,
better things to
I think
discuss.
at most this was more of just I guess a
Yeah.
practice of what I mentioned last meeting.
Awesome.
Of how to
So,
do it, where
Now
I-
that it's gone, we can
Yeah,
move on.
this was more of just a
Sweet.
test, I guess.
Excellent.
And I think as Amanda pointed out, in reality, in a business sense, it's probably academic.
Yeah.
It's something that should be done, but the reality is what you said. It's not, it wouldn't happen anyway.
And if there is a problem, like, just for that vote, if you two did have reservations, feel free to speak about it, because we don't want
Yeah.
we don't want this to be like a railroaded thing. It's good to have these types of discussions.
No, not at all. I just think, we should focus on our
Let's go.
real task.
Yeah.
Right. And now that that's that, we can do that.
One more little thought for you.
Yeah.
Make sure this comes together in a manner in which there are no gaps in availabilities and so on here in town. Just, we have good continuity without a gap that might create some illegal situations, as we eliminate from the planning, from the comprehensive plan and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, last meeting, there was a discussion about holding 2 a month one would be an educational time, and then the other would be talking about whatever the medical marijuana ordinance section. That's Freeman, Renee, if either of you want to jump in.
Yeah, but then it was clarified that there was no rush to get this done, so, okay.
I would state
We
it
can
in a
just stick with
slightly
one.
different manner. I would say the 2 meetings per month would be max. If there wasn't an issue that needed to be resolved, don't call a meeting. Let's not have meetings that don't have a serious purpose.
But I think that's why I wanted to ask about this meeting again,
That's exactly why I brought it up.
because, I mean, once a month, I can definitely have a section written up for what we may want to discuss for this, for any recommendations we want to make to the town. But I thought there was something about, from Freeman and Saran, about also providing more education to the matter as well, which, Renee, I thought that's something you were also for as well.
Well, we spend a lot of time at the previous meetings doing education, which doesn't leave us a whole lot of time left for
Mhm.
actual
Discussion.
discussion on what we're gonna do.
Well,
So, you know,
Can I make a suggestion? I mean,
Yeah.
to me, the education is important because before we would say, well, do this, this, or this, I'd love to hear.
and I
like you
completely
did.
understand that.
I would rather go through 1 or 2 more meetings where you teach us
Mhm.
things. For example, I never would have thought of electricity.
Right.
And then you have to teach me now, okay, now you brought it up, how would we actually have a rational provision about electricity? Does it
Mhm.
require a certificate from a licensed electrician? I mean,
Right.
what
Well,
would
the
be?
state requires some of those things. Do we have the,
I have the state law here, but for example, the reality that Renee said is you probably need 400 amps for many of these facilities, which would never occur to me. There are retail stores that don't have 400 amps.
Right.
well, because they're not using the same kind of
Well,
electricity.
I understand, but it wouldn't have occurred to me, is what I'm saying. So it was a learning. And then the question would be, I know the state has rules, but what's the practical effect? Is it you have a licensed PE? Do you have a licensed electrician?
Yeah, you have to be signed
You know,
off.
what are the practical
Right.
things that would?
Well,
once-
and education is the best thing, don't get me wrong. But that's why I suggested 2 meetings a month, because, you know, we do a lot of education here at these meetings for people who don't know or don't know anything about growing or sales or patients or anything else. So we don't always get a whole lot accomplished in an hour, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? So 2 hours a month, you know, we'd have probably a good hour of education and a good hour of setting some good solid things on paper, you know, so.
One of the more effective means of education, in my opinion, is right there. And we can get far better coverage with a lot more people that aren't going to show up tonight, we'll say, to listen to us. But they will turn on the TV occasionally and listen. And I think we just have to make sure what's available is available to those that want the knowledge.
Yeah. So, from what I'm gathering, we're just gonna do we're gonna stick to 1 meeting a month for 2 hours. 4 PM to 6 PM, that's at most.
How about,
It's probably more
let's plan
efficient.
on it 4 to 6, but.
But obviously, if we end early,
right.
we end early.
It's the holidays coming up, you know,
It's more
everybody's
efficient to
crazy
have 1
busy.
2-hour than 2 1-hours.
I would
Right.
agree.
Fair enough.
Okay, so,
But the time we have now, third Monday of the month at 4 PM, that's,
Sure.
Reasonable place to start, for sure.
.4 PM. Okay.
Obviously, this will all be available
Online?
online, precisely.
All right, so I guess the last thing I have is discussing next meeting then.
Mhm.
What you want to do, because it is going to be the holidays, so I don't know if we're going to have everyone here for that time.
Yeah.
I think it's the 18th. I was just checking that because I'm traveling. But I think it's the 18th is the 3rd, not the
You're
16th.
traveling?
Yeah, we're spending Christmas in Jamaica this year.
Lovely.
I really believe that Lone Star
Trying to-
Transfer is second to
Oh,
none in our
geez.
service, our customer
Trying to
service,
Freeman
and
in
the
his
care
phone.
that we give to our
House full of
This is
things
2
and
meetings in a row now.
Experience.
It just pops out of nowhere.
I think it's the 16th would be the
Okay.
next meeting.
I got married in Jamaica,
That's a look.
my honeymoon.
So do we just want to play the next meeting by ear if everybody's, if people can come, great. If
That's-
people have holiday plans, okay.
That's usually
Okay.
how I've been doing December meetings.
But tentatively the 16th,
Yep.
4 to 6. Okay.
So, as for the topic, what was proposed at the last meeting was that a certain section would be proposed, and I would be researching towns that have already done that type of area and get people's feedback throughout the month and try and make something of it. I don't know if that's still the process we want to try or if how this wants to be done.
Sounds like a start. We'll fill in the details as we progress.
Okay. Is there a certain area we want to try and tackle first?
If I could suggest in just a few minutes, I would go through some of the items from Cumberland, Maine,
Okay.
that they have, not saying I support them, or just this is what they put down. I'm not saying they're even doable. So they say control odors and emissions, not perceptible outside the exterior of a building, appropriate ventilation and filtration systems, including but on the air scrubbers, charcoal filtration, smoke debris. Then no signage shall be placed or otherwise used within 1,000 feet from property line of a pre-existing public or private school, daycare, or nursery school. Signage must comply with all applicable requirements, state law and regulation, as well as requirements section 315-63 of this ordinance. Section F, the fire department may require installation of smoke detectors, sprinklers, or other safety devices when the department determines that such devices are necessary due to the size, condition, or age of the structure. Security measures. It's long, I won't do all of it, but 24/7. Security recordings maintained for 30 days. Should apply to the police chief, is designated with the name and functioning telephone number of a 24-hour on-call staff person. 2, the town may provide notice of any operating problems associated with the operation. I'm not even sure that's allowed as a
What?
requirement. I'm not sure that last one meets
Requiring
state law.
someone to be 24/7.
Because it requires disclosure of the caregiver.
And the
and
patients.
Yeah,
That would go against
I'm
the-
not sure it meets state law.
Then also, is this the medical laws or is this their rec
Medical.
laws?
This is
Okay.
registered caregivers. I'm not sure that's a legal
Read
requirement.
that again to me, Freeman, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of
Um,
spacing out there.
First, it does the cameras 24/7, which
Mhm.
would be allowed.
Mhm.
It said preserving for 30 days could be excessive, but that is allowed. This is the one I don't know. The registered caregiver shall provide the police chief or his or her designee with the name and functioning telephone number of a 24-hour on-call staff person to whom the town may provide notice of any operating problems associated with the operation.
What
Yes.
if you use-
What happens is, for people who have offices or highbrow, we are required to have 24/7 surveillance where we do record everything.
Right.
Surveillance,
Patient
yes.
interactions,
All right.
because we are only allowed to give those tapes to an elected official, a Maine State Inspector from
The office.
the
yeah.
office, or if the police chief is an elected official,
Right.
then yes, but if your police chief is not an elected official, then he can't have them, so.
Which might
I
just
sort of,
cover-
I sort of heard that as that they need to have someone that they can contact at any point. Not that someone is surveilling at any point, but that there is a point person who the police can contact at any time of day if there is a problem, which would, I
Like
would
if there was
assume
a
be the
problem at
business
my place,
owner.
then you would call me.
Yeah, or
But
you-
you're a retail thing, but for just an ordinary registered caregiver that's
No,
not.
not at Grove facilities, we do not have to record
Right.
continuously.
But I also think a
Only-
registered caregiver, the idea they had to tell the police chief is just not, I don't
No.
think the law allows that.
No.
No.
I had the police chief over to my house. I couldn't get the fire chief, but, you know, it's a,
Yeah, they've been to our houses.
Glad Mr. Lash showed up. Max, are you aware of how the county 911 phone would work in relationship with this situation?
For cannabis-related issues? No.
I'm not
I'm
sure
getting
how-
some
I'm not
weird
sure how
looks of
busy they
confusion.
are.
Well,
and whether-
I'm not sure why you would,
I'm just thinking of 24-hour coverage and someone available to get in touch with the right individuals regardless. Would there be situations in which that would be quite valuable?
I mean, I would think that the real,
Well,
it would be the
I have a security
caregiver.
system,
Yeah,
so
was
I mean,
gonna
all
say,
the
we
police
all-
have to do is look on Facebook to find me, or.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
um,
we have 24-hour surveillance
Okay,
through
okay, I wasn't aware just
Security
whether-
too, so
Yeah.
anything.
Where you
that-
had the 24 hours covered?
Yes.
Good.
We have to have a hardwired security system
That-
at our grow facilities
That would
and
surprise me.
my office.
Yeah, that's,
So that's the
So-
next one on this list, the door
covers
and
that very
window.
nicely.
Door and window intrusion, robbery, and burglary alarm systems with audible and police department notification components that are professionally monitored and maintained in good working condition.
Mhm.
The next one is exterior lighting that illuminates the exterior walls of the licensed premises and complies with applicable provisions of this code. Why, you have to educate, why would a private medical caregiver, why would the town need to have exterior lighting on their operation, given it's private and?
Because
it's-
someone in the town decided that that was an important point.
Someone in this,
probably.
well, actually,
Does the
I
state
believe the
have that-
state has
the
that.
For,
outside
even for a
lights?
private
Wouldn't it make
caregiver?
Yes.
this, wouldn't it make the surveillance more adequate?
Maybe, yeah,
Yes.
for
Right.
safety.
You know, I mean, having outside lights on your grow facility is a great idea anyway. Yeah, I mean.
So you think that's, okay.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Discourage the fools who might want to do something.
I don't want my facilities black as a boot, so that
Yes.
people can just break in without me seeing them.
There you go, right
Because all
on.
of mine are on
One
motion
thing I
sensors,
do want to
so.
bring up from the scrubber part is the fact that someone who is growing outdoors in a greenhouse would be incapable of doing that part. So that's something that we should think about, how we're going to deal with people who are growing outdoors.
But that's also another thing that comes down with the land use ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a restriction that we could put as a town
Yep.
committee.
Properly
We could
located,
suggest
explain.
that, you know, the village district, if you get caught, your plants are automatically, you know, if somebody complains about the smell or whatever, and you live in this certain district,
Area.
then you could have it so that they are, if they can't harvest them right then and there, then they're removed.
Are you talking about just caregivers or everybody?
Well, there
Everybody.
there is supposed to be an
So-
odor
You're gonna take.
performance
I
standard.
think you're gonna get crazy if you start going with people's personal rights to grow their own plants.
That's coming from the state. You know, I mean, I've talked to the
Well-
state multiple times, and
Good
if,
for you.
because there's no enforcement here,
Yep.
who's gonna enforce all these rules? So
Well-
basically, it's on a complaint by complaint basis.
And it's also, part of what we are doing is more on the registered caregivers,
Yeah,
not the
okay, yeah, rather
unregistered
than-
people.
right.
The people who are just growing from themselves, we can talk about, that can also be part of this, but our focus was more of just the registered caregivers. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, yeah, I just,
I remember the good old days in which you couldn't walk up and down Main Street in Waldeboro without smelling cannabis.
Go to Las Vegas.
I bet.
Holy moly.
And that's coming from you. Impressive.
I'm all for it, but, you know, it's very weird to be in a state that's recreationally legal,
Yeah,
you know.
Yep.
It's Walking down the street.
I mean, the odor itself, that is something in our ordinance already
Yeah,
for
it's not- yeah.
businesses
Mm.
that they're supposed to
Yeah.
try and contain.
oh, I was only really talking about sort of when you get into like telling people what they can do in their own yard is gonna,
Right.
with everyone in Waldeboro could be
Well, and
a
I
contentious issue.
completely understand that, but, you know, if you have 15 neighbors complaining about one person who's growing,
Then
who are you gonna appease, 15 neighbors or one person that's growing? I
Unfortunately.
mean, and
Yeah.
a lot of towns are doing
And that's what we have
that,
to
you know,
balance
it's
too.
not something that we're gonna go knock on people's doors and go, are you growing marijuana?
So, for next meeting, what topic or section should I try and
Stay in touch with
Board.
stay in touch with the select board and keep the game going smoothly. Do what the select board needs to keep the game going straight.
But I mean, if there's a topic that we're discussing about possible recommendations, what do we want to try and discuss? Security, odor, testing,
Safety.
safety?
Edibles, consumption,
What, what's in this supposed ordinance that we want to take a look at? Because Freeman was just listing off a few that Cumberland, Maine did, but does any of that sound like something we want to tackle, or just try and see what?
All of it should be tackled on an as-needed basis when it's an obvious issue. We'll be counting on you perhaps to keep track of the obvious issue at the moment.
So I'll just pick one pretty much for next meeting.
Fair enough.
Does anyone?
Keeping the select board,
I'll try to come in with a copy of what the state already has
Okay.
good.
for regulations for the caregivers, just to give us a baseline of, so that we don't have to, so we know where to begin.
Right.
You know what the state's at. I mean, not that they actually have anyone policing any of the rules, but they have been writing rules along, so.
Yeah, so let's just throw a dart at a board and see what I get.
There you go.
All right.
Spin the wheel.
That's all I had then.
Well done.
If anyone else has any comments.
What I'll try to do is, I'll try to make sets of Auburn, Gray, and Brunswick, what they have in terms of regulations, so everybody has a set of them.
Windsor also has regulations, that's what.
Would you be talking to some of those people that are involved with these regulations?
And Rockland is working on
Rockland's working on
regulations
something.
right now as
It
well.
sounds more like maybe next meeting we'll just look at what other towns have already done. That
Right.
seems to be what we'll do.
And some of these, remember, are provisional, they're moratorium, so
Right.
they're not ordinances yet. So it's just discussion points. no more
But I do
than
know
that.
Windsor is opening up.
And to answer your
Both
question, Ted,
medical and
I'll
recreational, so
contact
they have
some
some
of the
stuff right now.
planners or people associated with it and ask
Excellent.
them.
And they're somewhat closer
Try to keep
to us
it-
as a town than
Trying to
Cumberland
keep in
is
touch
as
with the
far
real
as
issues.
Sure.
the makeup of the town. I'd like to see, because some of these towns are really not Waldeboro, so to see something that's a little bit, a mismatch of all of the towns of Maine, because we're not in southern Maine.
Okay. And then what I'd say is, we could take that and interleave it with what Amanda's gonna come, which is the law, and
Mhm.
see how many of them actually, not that we should do them, simply even are they permissible to even be discussed?
Mhm.
Because the one thing we don't wanna do is discuss things that Maine law doesn't even allow to be
Right.
discussed.
All right. I think
Should we have
Do I
a
have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
second?
That's 4.
Hooray!
Right. Good one.